Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up and the continuation of our third Halloween horror series. This year we're focusing on special anniversaries of classic horrors, and now we come to one of the ultimate thrillers as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Hitchcock's masterpiece Psycho. Much has been written and lauded about Psycho and its sequels of varying strength, so much of what we have to say in this retrospective may feel recycled, but we couldn't let 2020 pass without celebrating a movie classic. Hitchcock was in the ascendancy in the mid to late 1950s, releasing a string of classic features: Rear Window in 54, To Catch a Thief in 55, Vertigo in 58, and North by Northwest in 59. By the turn of the decade, Hitch was looking for something different, an adaptation of a source novel. Hitchcock was experimenting with the idea of making a shocking horror film, one that would keep audiences guessing until the very end, the type of film that would be sniffed at by the critics, but lapped up by audiences, and would ultimately be cheap to make. Hitchcock was an avid reader of the literary section of the New York Times, and one day he noticed the paper's review of Robert Bloch's 1959 novel Psycho. Hitchcock quickly concluded that this would be his next big project. The chief antagonist of the story, Norman Bates, actually far more vicious and sadistic in Bloch's original novel than we were given in the film treatment, was inspired by real-life Wisconsin serial killer Ed Gein from the 1950s, who has since also inspired further horror icons, Texas Chainsaw Massacre's Leatherface and Jamie Gumb from The Silence of the Lambs, to name just a couple. With Psycho, Hitchcock prepares to unnerve from the outset, with the vertical slashes across the screen making up Saul Bass's innovative title design, accompanied by Bernard Herrmann's incredible score. Joseph Stefano is hired to work on the adaptation of Bloch's novel, and Hitchcock sits with him to mould the story for the film, making Norman a far more sympathetic character in the film than the sordid, fat, middle-aged man of the novel who beheads the girl in the shower. Stefano's Norman has a haunting look in his eyes throughout, and audiences are hooked by the fantastic performance from then up-and-coming 28-year-old New Yorker Anthony Perkins. Perkins was Hitchcock's first and only choice for Bates, and to get the opportunity to work with Hitchcock, Perkins didn't even cast an eye over the script before agreeing to take on the role, a role that would define his career over the next 3 decades. Janet Leigh, a big Hollywood star at the time, would also be Hitchcock's choice to play the fated Marion Crane. The biggest star of the picture being killed off in the first 30 minutes highlights how subversive Hitchcock was trying to be. With Psycho, Hitchcock would utilise motifs and techniques he developed over a lifetime of filmmaking, but to different effect. Marion Crane steals $40,000 from her employer and runs away to her lover, but has to stay at the Bates Motel. Feeling increasingly guilty about her actions, Marion's talk with the shy Norman Bates leads to her decision to return the money. Then she is killed in the shower, seemingly by Norman's mother. As with Vertigo, the death of the central female character occurs halfway through the film, and then the real story of the film is revealed. Such is the shock of the killing that for the rest of the film the audience has a heightened sense of fear and dread. Hitchcock designed the film, again rather like Vertigo, so that the suspense is maintained to the very end. The film's most infamous scene, perhaps of course for Bates's reveal before the final reel, is the shower sequence. 78 shots were edited into 45 seconds of screen time, but the sequence took a week to shoot and still stands up 6 decades on as one of the most frightening single moments in movie history. Despite Marion seemingly washing away the sin of running off with the $40,000, she's exposed under the running water, and Mother catches up with her and reprimands her for her guilt. The original Psycho continues to surprise new generations of audiences to this day. From the ingenious marketing of the film at cinemas and theatres the world over back in 1960, with no late admittance to showings of the film once it had begun, for fear that the narrative would be spoiled for others, to its lasting appeal over the last 60 years, Psycho stands up as one of the greatest movie thrillers in Hollywood history and one of Hitchcock's finest works. The very idea for a sequel to Psycho seemed ludicrous, but in 1983, director Richard Franklin enticed Perkins and Vera Miles, Marion's sister Lila from the original, back for a sequel, which sees Bates released from prison having served his sentence, much to the anger of Lila, who we learn married Marion's boyfriend Sam Loomis. Psycho 2 shouldn't work in any way, and yet it does. Whilst the atmosphere of the original can never truly be replicated, Part 2 is a solid continuation of the story, focusing on Bates adjusting to life back in the real world. Perkins plays up Bates' paranoia very well, and Lila and her daughter playing with Bates, who himself is trying to cling on to some kind of normality, is very well handled. There are some bloodier, more in-your-face deaths in this colorized installment compared to the original, coupled with one or two dodgy special effects, but there's ultimately much to recommend about Part 2. With 1986's Psycho 3, the concept is definitely stretched too far. Part 3 would mark the directorial debut of Anthony Perkins, and the film does have some promise in places and does play with elements of the original film in interesting new ways, but does fall short in most departments. It seems to be in the denouement of both sequels where much of the good work is undone. In this case, it's Maureen falling down the stairs like Arbogast in the original, but with an incomprehensibly cheaper looking effect. Perkins also unfortunately rushes much of his dialogue third time around, making this Norman seem less polished here than he's done previously. The ideas are there, it's the execution of them that lets this third instalment down. Psycho 4 The Beginning was directed by Mick Garris, who would later also direct the made-for-television adaptation of Stephen King's The Shining in 1997. The film had a similar made-for-television feel about it and was released in 1990, the 30th anniversary of the original. It's always difficult giving background to a killer, and this plays out as an origin story. E.T.'s Henry Thomas playing a young Norman tormented and abused by his mother and her partner, which leads to Norman poisoning the pair, leading to his downfall. The fourth instalment contains none of the verve or spirit of the original, or indeed the other two sequels. This feels like an unwarranted third sequel that's trying to milk a franchise out of an original that's never been bettered. The worst was yet to come, however, when director Gus Van Sant decided to make a shot-for-shot remake of the original in 1998. You couldn't even boast that it was released to celebrate a particular anniversary of the original film. This is a mess from start to finish. The music is constantly trying to play catch-up. Whether this is a deliberate stylistic edit or not, who knows? Regardless, it's infuriating. There's poor, static line delivery from the outset. It just feels like the actors are sat there waiting for their paycheck. Anne Heche has none of the likability of Janet Leigh, and Vince Vaughn has none of the subtlety of Perkins before him. The reveal of the Bates house and the neon sign of the hotel doesn't look imposing and gothic as it did in the original. Van Sant's direction is dreadful. He can't even frame Marion's centre while she's driving. If you're attempting to do the original beat for beat, you've got to try harder. This shoddy remake lacks any kind of suspense. The execution of the shower kill and the lead up with Norman blatantly masturbating while watching Marion through the peephole would probably make Hitchcock turn in his grave. Ultimately, nothing is improved over the original film, making this a redundant rehash of a classic. Psycho lay dormant for a long while after the box office failure of the 1998 remake. The film would take over more than $20 million under its $60 million budget, until Universal America launched Bates Motel, an origin story made for television for Norman and his mother moving to Oregon to set up their own motel. The television series ran for 5 seasons and 50 episodes between 2013 and 2017, with Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga inspired casting as Norman and Mother Norma. The series was dark when it needed to be and foreshadowed things to come, whilst also subverting plot points from the original film to flesh out the background of the characters. This is how you do an origin story, a well-handled, nuanced precursor to the story we all know. Despite some lackluster sequels and reimaginings over the years, Hitchcock's Psycho is an unstoppable force, frightening audiences for 6 decades through the suspense, the music, and the characterization. Happy 60th anniversary, Psycho. From Crawford-Clark Close-Up. What are your thoughts on Psycho and its sequels and prequels? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe at the top of the page so you don't miss out on any new content. Come and find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can also drop us an email with suggestions for future reviews on the channel to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com, and you can find us on the movie app Letterboxd. Just search CC Closeup. Coming next, for our final Halloween horror video for this year, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of Kubrick's masterwork, The Shining. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.